Hello, welcome to number 13 of Thoughts of a Whole Brain Man. And today, I'm going to talk about a thing called domino thinking. Yes, I'd never heard of it before I'd heard of it, which is obvious, really. That's true of everything. But I am a person with autism, you may know, and that means that what comes packaged with that is a sensitive central nervous system. So I'm quite mindful about environment, sounds, movements, lights, and things in my environment. And I'm inclined in the morning, as best I can, to wake up in a place of peace. And I live in the countryside deliberately, as this picture will suggest. And so for me, the sound of morning is one of bird song or rain or wind. But it's very, very rare that I ever switch on the television in the morning. But one day, many years ago, about 10 years ago from now, um, I kind of waddled downstairs and I thought, I just had this feeling to switch the TV on. So I put the television on and it was the breakfast, one of those breakfast shows in the morning. And I just caught the end of a conversation. There was some chat, and then it was going to go to the weather. And I kind of, you know what it's like if you step into a room and there's a conversation that's already underway. And so, as well as hearing what's being said, you kind of piecing together what they're talking about. And there was the two presenters sitting on sofas and two female journalists and another person I kind of realized was a psychologist. And the two presenters and the two journalists were very, very irate, talking about someone in scathing terms. This woman is this and this woman is that, and how could she and how dare she, and things. And it transpired that what had happened was that a man faked his own death in order to get insurance money. And the scam began in a flat that he shared with his wife that overlooked the seafront in a part of northeast England. And it turned out that while he was in the cupboard that they'd kind of made a secret room in a cupboard for him to be in, while he was tucked away and hidden in there, his wife would look out of the window in the afternoon and regular as clockwork, every single day, the man's father would walk along the seafront, hoping to find his son's body. And he did that at 3 o'clock every day, because that was the time that was given for when he disappeared. Because the idea they came up with, because his hobby was canoeing, was that he was lost at sea, having gone off in his canoe, and he got the name Canoe Man, nickname, you know. And so this woman watched Canoe Man's dad walk up and down this part of the coast every day for 3 years, come rain or shine, come snow or hail or wind. And she would watch him walking up and down. And she knew he was grieving. She knew of his sadness because they talked. But she never told him that his son was alive. She could have saved him the grief. She could have relieved him of the mourning. But she didn't. She just watched him walk up and down until he died of a broken heart. And these two irate journalists and the presenters were describing in very visceral terms how wicked, how immoral, how unethical, how dastardly, how sadistic, how cruel Canoe Man's wife must be as a person to watch this unfold and do nothing. nothing at all to help the man's pain when she could have done. And just as they were cutting to the weather, they were describing how awful and terrible this person is. But then the psychologist lady kind of sat forward a bit and said, it could be that she's a terrible, horrible, wicked woman. Then again, it could just be domino thinking. Tink, here's the weather. And I heard that, my ears went, what? Right. So instead of switching the television off, which I would normally do, I left it on just to kind of find out what did this person mean by domino thinking. Now, the others must have had the same kind of reaction, because when it kind of came back to them, they said, oh, just before we got to the weather, you said domino thinking. What's that? And your psychiatrist said something I thought was really cool. She said, well, imagine, if you can, that a train of thought is made of many steps. And at each step, there is a door. So when we decide something and we're going to have a plan of action, we go through the doors of the idea and we follow the train of thought. And each one leads to the next, which leads to the next, which leads to the next. Hence, domino thinking, right? So, and they said, right, well, what's this got to do with her being... She said, no. They thought of how they can get out of their financial difficulties. They could write a number one pop song. Probability very low, likelihood 0. No, that's no good. They could write the screenplay of a hit movie. Reward very high, likelihood very low, forget that one. So having exhausted all the legitimate ways that they could rescue their financial situation, then the next thing is to look at criminal ways. They could commit armed robbery. They're old. They're not going to do that. But they could fake his death because he's quite old and he's got life insurance. There's an idea. And they go through the door of, let's do that. Ding, domino 1. The next thing is, because as we know, love and scandal are the best sweeteners of tea. Right? If you want news to go round, tell someone, but also tell them, don't tell anyone else. Well, that will spread like wildfire. Right? So they decided, we must keep it absolutely secret. Dum. Doorway 2. Right, but that means we can't tell our friends. Dum. Condition number 3. Or our children. Or our parents. And as the person proceeds along the pathway, the options close. Dum, 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 dum. And what you're left with is a very narrow train of thought that is compelling, because there are no options. All of the options, all the varieties of thought, all the flexibility has been shut down, and all you're left with is, do this. Wow. Now, if you think of a lot of behaviors that humans do that are unpalatable to you or unpleasant to you, and you think, how can a person do such a thing? Now you have another way of looking at it. You can unpack it, as it were, and look at the content, look at the background, look at the childhood, look at the nutrition that they've experienced, look at the media they've been exposed to, etc., etc., etc. Right? You can do all of that. You could do an astrological birth chart and look at the fabric of their karmic path this way round. You could do that. You could do past life regression work and see where they've been in the past and see if any of that has any bearing on the present. You could do that. Or you could understand that they were exercising domino thinking without realizing it. And they had an idea, but to support that idea, they had to go through a doorway. And then to support that idea, it led to another one. And before you know it, you've got a person doing something which is either really unpleasant or profoundly stupid. There's a lot of it about, right? But we haven't necessarily got access to a person's karmic pathway information. We haven't necessarily got access to a person to interview them about their past and what they've done, right? So if sometimes you're puzzled about how come, why a person does what they do, and there is no way for you to gain actual factual information, but you can speculate. One way of being able to give yourself a sort of a sense of understanding is to go, right, domino thinking. And that doesn't tell you the nuts and bolts or the content of what happened, but it does let you know that the person's got themselves into a niche train of thought that has no flexible options, and that behavior is the result. That doesn't mean it isn't unpalatable. That doesn't mean it isn't unkind. That doesn't mean it's suddenly become wonderful when before it was terrible and cruel. It just gives you a way of being able to kind of, I guess, categorize or pigeonhole or hold unsavory human behaviors without it causing you to go into a meltdown of confusion, befuddlement, and bewilderment. All right. So, domino thinking is a way of being able to comprehend the odd things about humans without necessarily having to worry about the nuts and bolts or the whys and wherefores. Okay? Yes. A fascinating little thing that it's funny, isn't it? You can just kind of walk around a corner and there's a little nugget of information that you weren't expecting at all. And it can illuminate quite a few things. Domino thinking. Yeah. Take care. See you next time. Bye.